Hello, everybody. It is time for part 2 of episode 4 of HBO's show, The Gilded Age. Are you guys ready? I know you guys been waiting for this. I got some really good comments. Let's go. Hey, everybody. It is me, the infamous Kiki, back for part 2 of episode 4 of HBO's The Gilded Age. On my channel, I take a deep dive into the historical aspects, especially the African American parts. I will tell you things that other channels may not know, may not be aware of, or they just don't feel like going over it. I decided to divide episode 4 into 2 different parts. I might start doing that from now on because I do like to take a deep dive into the historical aspects of the show. I can't talk today. I got braces, so it's hard for me to, sometimes I lisp when I talk, but that's because I have braces. But anyway, so I got my notes. I got my trusty notes, and we're going to pick off where we left off. Please like, share, subscribe, comment below if you have anything to add. Check my other Gilded Age videos. At the end of this video, I'll have like little boxes that'll show up, and you just click on those. If you have not watched the first part of my deep dive into episode 4, please stop the video right now. Go watch that. Look at my Gilded Age playlist and watch the other episodes. And every week, I'm going to be covering these episodes, so come on, let's get it. So, we're just going to pick up where we left off. So, Mrs. Russell and Mrs. Payne are having a discussion. I guess Mrs. Payne then finally came around. Her husband was like, look, we're going to end up being paupers if you don't get it together and try to bring Mrs. Russell into society. And she told her husband she'd try. So they're talking, and she tells Mrs. Russell that it would help to get in the good graces of Mrs. Astor with the socialite stuff. And she tells her the best way to do it is, to break through is to get invited to stuff. She invites her to the concert at the Academy of Music. They have their own box. That's a big thing. So, it's a place, the opera and places like that was a place to be seen by all the social and where people schmoozed and hung out with all the rich people. Kind of like, like today how rich people have like concerts and after parties they go to. It's kind of like the same thing. People go to be seen. They dress real nice, and and then she also talks about Mrs. Russell, about being in the Red Cross. Mrs. Russell has interest in that, and they tell Mrs. Russell also that the person that, in order to get in good graces with Mrs. Astor, is speak to a Mr. McCallister, who Mr. McCallister apparently is a friend of Mrs. Astor and a confidant. This is a real person. There is a historical person by the name of Ward McCallister. So this is not made up. He was a real person. And who was Ward McCallister? Here's a picture of him right here. On the show, he's going to be played by the wonderful and the talented Nathan Lane. And Nathan Lane is a legend in stage, film, especially the stage. But who is Ward McCallister? So here's just a little bit of information. Ward McCallister was Mrs. Astor's social confidant and friend. He was influential in deciding who or who was not a part of New York society. In fact, Ward McCallister and Mrs. Astor came up with a list of who was part of New York society. In 1892, Ward McCallister leaked to the press the names of 400 people who made up New York society. He, quote unquote, leaked. Yeah, right. Like, even back then, the leaks was fake. Just like on social media, people leaking stuff is fake. The list became famous nationwide and was called the Astor 400 or the McCallister 400. Ward McCallister did not come from money. He did have Southern gentry roots, which, again, when I read this stuff, it's dubious at best. He has social connections with the wealthy. His father, Matthew Hall McCallister, was ex-mayor of Savannah, a judge, a lawyer, and a member of the Georgia State Legislature. So he had some kind of political connections. His mother was Louisa Charlotte Cutler, had New York society connections through her Newport relations. Ward McCallister's uncle, Sam Ward, on his maternal side, married Emily Astor, which is William Astor's daughter. So there is a familiar connection with the Astors as well. So that's very interesting. Ward McCallister was not rich. He lived well-to-do and comfortably, but he had a modest fortune during his years in California. He also married into money. So he married a Sarah Tainter Gibbons, and she had money and was described as a Georgia heiress. Her personality was opposite from Ward McCallister's flamboyant personality. She was mild-mannered. The McCallisters had one daughter and two sons, and they lived in the East 19th Street in Manhattan and spent summers in Newport, Rhode Island. So that's a little bit about Ward McCallister. Just give you some information about that. So back to the story. So Ida, Oscar, and Marion are gossiping about Miss Chamberlain, and I guess Marion wants to know, what exactly did she do? And so it turns out that, like I said, the real life Arabella Huntington, who Miss Chamberlain is based upon, Arabella Huntington, apparently, from what I've read, was having a long time affair with her husband, Collis Huntington. They were having like a 13-year affair. And apparently she was married to somebody else. He was married to somebody else. Her husband died. His wife died. And then they ended up getting together. And she had a son. But apparently that son was not by her husband. It was by Collis Huntington. So the same thing about Miss Chamberlain is that apparently she had a son. And the son looked exactly like Mr. Chamberlain. And apparently they were having an affair. And his wife ended up getting sick and died. And so apparently they were having a long-standing affair. And her son has moved away because I guess they got tired of all the whispers and stuff. And he moved away to Chicago being a doctor somewhere. So that's the information about Miss Chamberlain and why they don't like her. Because apparently, Mrs. Chamberlain was having a long-standing affair with this man. And apparently he may have been away on business, doing other things, but he was with Miss Chamberlain, and the ages don't really match up with her husband and stuff. So speaking of going with somebody's husband, child, look out. Look out, Mr. Russell. Look out. Watch out. Oh no, watch out. Miss Turner is on the prowl like a cat at night, cat's like a nocturnal. So Mr. Russell is in his room because, back then they slept in separate rooms and they cohabitated when they needed to co-mingle. And Mrs. Chamberlain gets bucket naked, and gets in the bed with Mr. Russell. And he jumps out that bed and he looks at her like, and let me tell you, child, I was thinking it's finna go on. I thought he was gonna be like, okay. She tell Mr. Russell, she trying to make her move. This is her chance. He tell that broad straight up, real talk. Sorry, Star Wars toys. Straight up, real talk. I got the woman I want. I have a woman. She like, well, I know she trying to social climb. She don't give you everything you need. He tell her straight up, girl, I got everything I need. Girl, what? Girl, what? Girl, bye. Girl, I got everything I need. And Miss Turner looked shook. Like she was like, I guess she thought she was gonna show them flat titties and just start that little stuff, and he was just gonna be like, come on, mama, come on. Like, no, he kicked out the room. He was like, okay, and he's like, and I won't tell my wife what happened because, apparently she's a good employee. And he was like, I should tell my wife, but if I'm not going to tell her, so you can still stay employed so it won't upset her. I was like, Mr. Russell, you, Mr. Russell. I thought he was going to cheat. Many men back then took mistresses and lovers, male and female, and slept with maids and had illegitimate children by him, and Lord and God knows what else. But Mr. Russell, it says, I have everything that I need. And I was like, prophesy, brother, prophesy. Like, he was like, I ain't trying to ruin what I have with my wife. Because again, Mrs. Russell is a good wife. Like, she's social climbing. Yes, she's worried about that. But she always stick by her husband. And it's like, it's hard to find a good woman like that. A good person, a good man or woman is hard to find. So I'm so glad that they did not take this show into whether he gonna cheat, because I love them as a couple. I love them. So then we go to Bridget, and she's talking to the cook, and I forgot the cook's name, over at the Van Rhymes house, and she's crying and she's upset, and the cook is like, "What is going on? What's happening with you?" And she has like an antagonistic relationship with her mother, and she tells her that I think her mother's coming to visit or something like that, and she was saying that she don't want to see her mom. Her mom didn't do anything to protect her, and she whispers, and I had a closed caption on. But apparently her mother did not protect her. I was trying to read her lips, and it looked like she was saying her father. So apparently her father has abused her in some way, and her mother was not there to help her. Her mother did not protect her. She said her mother knew what was going on. And a lot of this happened back in the day. A lot of this happens, not even back in the day, but today. I mean, it's very, very, very sad. And I could tell, like I said in my last video when I did episode 3, the way she pulled away from Jack during the date, it was kind of like, he was coming on real strong, and she just was really like turned off by that. And he don't mean nothing by it. Like, he's not trying to hurt her, I don't think. I hope not. I hope that. But he's real sweet, but she just don't know, how to deal with an attention from a man that's normal and not, and that's typical for people who have been abused. She just has issues, that she need to work on, and she confides in the cook, and it was sad. Like, it was real sad. So then we move on to Peggy. So it's Friday. And Peggy has decided, I think it's her mother's birthday. And so she, remember in episode 3, she told her dad was like, do it for your mother. She wants you to be there to celebrate her birthday, and we miss you. And again, there's some kind of issue between her and her dad. I don't know exactly what happened. It's kind of a mystery. And I don't like the fact that it's a mystery. I wish they would just come out and say it. Like, this is what happened between them. I mean, besides them just being, a different generation, because I consider it a generational kind of thing, maybe, that Peggy wants to do something different, and and he has seen some things, and so it starts out with in the beginning, before they even get to them, at the dinner table. But it starts out, the Peggy's family, they live in a nice house. They even have their own servant, and it starts out with them showing pictures of the family. I thought that was very significant, because rarely in TV shows or in books or in movies or anything are we witnessing pictures of African American people during the Victorian, Edwardian, Gilded Age. Just normal pictures, not pictures of people being slaves, not pictures of people being servants, but just family, familial pictures. Every movie that I've seen that is about some Victorian people, there's never any black people in the movie. Every movie that I've seen about the Victorian era, Gilded Age, whether it be American history, British history, I mean, you never really see no black people nowhere, but black people lived in England and in America and other countries too. They worked in people's households. They had their own communities, their own neighborhood. Peggy lives in Brooklyn. Brooklyn was a African-American part of New York where all the black people live. And they had their own businesses, their own streets, their own lives. And yes, they took them old pictures where you got to sit up there and just, not move. They took our pictures too. So I loved it the way they showed the vignette of pictures of Peggy and her family and family members, letting people know that, yes, black people went, there were black photographers, family photographers, just like everybody else that took these vintage pictures, but you rarely get to see them. So I present to you some pictures of really dapper, nice Victorian black people that you can find these pictures online. And I feel like it's a piece of lost history, because these people will look real clean and laid, and the women look so beautiful and the men look so beautiful. And like I said, when we talk about Victorian things, there's channels where you see, wonderful, beautiful costuming, and you see, a lot of cottagecore. If you're not familiar with cottagecore, look it up. But it's whole witchcore, cottagecore, a dark academia core, and I love all of that. I love all the historical stuff. But it's primarily, the YouTube channels and the media that you see, it's just primarily white women. You never see black women dressed up in Victorian things. And I'm like, okay, we lived in the Victorian age. We didn't just spring out of, up out of since the 1930s or 40s. Like, yes, black people lived in the Victorian age and they wore Victoria clothing and they took pictures. So I would think it'd be a treat to just show you guys some pictures of real black Victorian people. Here we go. Yay. So you get a really glimpse of that these people look like anybody else. But again, this is not something I would really love, like I said, I've said it before in many of these episodes, to have a whole show that is focusing on the black middle class, the black lower class, the upstairs, downstairs, that existed in not just in Caucasian and upper middle class, but also existed in there was an upper black class of people that had servants and everything else, and how different and the compare and contrast it was to the white people and their servants and the black people and their servants. That's something even I don't know. Like I've rarely read any books even about black people during the Victorian age and the educated class. And there was an educated class during the Gilded Age, during the late 1800s, early 1900s, that we don't see in media and film. It's just stuff you have to read about. So I just thought that was interesting. So Peggy's sitting around her family, and her dad tells a story about his Uncle William, and that he loves eggs and jelly. Okay, full candor here. I eat eggs with strawberry jelly. I love eggs and jelly. I don't know where it comes from, but I love eggs and jelly. And that made me kind of giggle, because he was like, he would have to pick the jelly out the eggs. And I'm like, no, don't do that. You got to keep the eggs in the jelly. I eat eggs with jelly. My kids thinks it's strange. But then he was like, then he said, and then my Uncle William was sold. And he was like, and then it was kind of like, oh, okay. So that's showing that the dad had lived during slavery. This is the late 1800s. So, of course, he would have been a kid during slavery. So him telling that story was funny, it's poignant, but then you can kind of see like the mom like wanting to change the subject, which again, I'm going in a deep dive. I feel personally the reason why a lot of our history is lost is because a lot of people went through horrific slavery. They achieved things, started businesses, or just moved on with their lives, and then they never wanted to talk about it. They never wanted to tell their kids and grandkids, besides anecdotal little stories here and there, how horrible it was. They would just tell their kids, yeah, it was bad, it was bad. Like I said, even my own personal history. I love genealogy, and my whole family, on my mom's side, we have like a whole book. We have a whole family book. Next video, I'm going to show y'all my family book. But we're a lot of us record keepers. I'm one of them, have made family trees, and we keep records and we add on to the book. But, so history is not just something I do for other people as a hobby. It's real to me. Like, it's real I think it's important for us to know our history. But I think the pain of segregation and slavery and being mistreated, that it caused black people to just kind of like, let's not talk about it. Let's just shut up about it and just move on. And I think that now people in the modern age, they want to talk about it and they want to say things about it. But it's like those instances and values should have been instilled in us right after slavery. But like I said, being in the black culture, it's kind of like we have a culture of don't ask, don't tell. Like, people don't want to talk about bad things. Why? I've never gotten that. But again, I was raised by my grandmother, can tell you that she was from the deep South and had the same attitude of just glossing over bad things. And so you have a whole generation of people who grew up and didn't know where they came from and didn't really understand certain things. And so when they go out in life and they experience discrimination and hatred, they're like, whoa, they was shook and shocked about it. Especially, my generation and younger. But it's like people are trying to undo the mistakes of the past by us having children, and me in particular, me personally, teaching my children their history, teaching their children about their ancestors. I have a really interesting background. Like, I have, traced my roots pretty extensively, and I tell my kids stories about things that happen, and hopefully I tell my kids, I'm passing on the family tree so they can pass it on to their kids, so they can just, as technology becomes more vast and more things in DNA and record keeping, that they can keep and carry it on. That I'm not just doing this just because it's a hobby only. I'm doing this because I want my kids to understand where they come from in their past. And I think it's important for everybody, no matter what race, religion, who you are, what culture, it's for you to know your past. And again, other civilizations know this. Other countries know this and recognize it, especially in Asian civilizations. They're really into like family history and going back thousands of years. But somehow in America, it's just kind of like, it's just the attitude of whatever. But then people start getting curious as time goes on, because we are our own peoples, but we're also our ancestors. We are a big composite of what other people have said or done. There's things that we do, that we say, that we don't even understand why we say, why we do, why we think this way. And some of it, yes, has to do with how we're raised. But then there's things about DNA that people don't understand. They don't know what traits people or personalities may have been passed down. And so I think it's great for us to know ourselves and know our history. So, Peggy was go ahead and tell her parents that she's working for the Globe. They're happy, and that she's working. Her dad was saying that he wanted her to come work for him at in the pharmacy. That's what he wanted. He didn't want her to go work somewhere else. And he wanted her to come work for the family business and the pharmacy. I mean, just like any other dad, even today, people have a family business. They want their kid to take over. And apparently, I'm just assuming that Peggy is their only child. I haven't seen any other kids. I haven't had anybody mention anything about having any other children. So I assume Peggy is their only child. I assume. But I don't know. It might be a brother out there and doing something he shouldn't be doing. Who knows? I was cracking up about the Peggy's family's maid. Like, she was real sassy. She was just like, okay, whatever. Like, the way she came. And then Marion shows up. Child, the maid was like, do you have a car? Like, who are you? And, where Peggy and them live is Brooklyn. It's all on the black side of town. So Marion sticks out, and people walking down the street looking at her like, who is this white woman? But I know that's what they wanted to say. Who is she? What's happening? And so finally they bring her in, and then Peggy was like, what are you doing here? Oh my God, and Peggy was visibly upset and angry. Like, I didn't invite you here. Like, what are you doing here? And I think Peggy's reaction was a little bit over the top. Like, she was a little bit too like angry, but considering the relationship that Peggy has with her dad and her family, I'm sure Peggy was probably thinking, hell, I don't even want to be here, much less Marion being here. And then, her dad was like, okay, like, the woman you work for is here. And then Marion brought some shoes. Child, Marion brought some shoes. I was like, she brought what now? Yes, indeed. Marion brought some used shoes. Talk about, I guess you could, and the mom was like, what are these shoes for? But once Marion started getting in the house and started looking around and realizing that Peggy's family come from good, like, her family's a middle class family, that their house is, they live in this big old brownstone, this big old house. She was looking around like this. Like, she was like, oh, I should have brought these shit. So the mom like took offense, and she was like, oh no, you can donate them. And Marion was trying to backtrack. I was dead. Like, I was dying. I was like, bruh. So Peggy, was like, okay, we're leaving. Let's go. And Peggy gets mad. And then, Marion was like, I wasn't trying to offend you. I wasn't trying to hurt you. And I felt bad for Marion. The way Peggy leaned into, she could have been a little bit nicer. You know what I'm saying? Because Marion don't really know. She ain't never been around no black folks or nothing like that. And then, and she was like, why are you treating me? I thought we were friends. Pause. Peggy tells her, okay, you think we were friends. Do you ever ask me anything about my life? Do you ever ask anything about what I'm doing? Or do you know anything about me? And then that hit me like if you go back and watch all the episodes from episode 1 through 4, Peggy is just kind of like along for the ride. Like, Peggy is there with Marion shopping. She's there with Marion at the park. She's basically there an escort because Miss Van Rhyme don't trust Marion by herself. So Peggy is kind of like an escort. She's kind of like there. And Marion is doing all the talking, and it's about Marion. Mr. Rakes wants to marry her and all this kind of stuff. But if you really watch, it's like, are they really friends? Like, she's friendly to her, and she's there, but it's not a friendship of like equal friendship. And like I said, I don't know if that was just Marion being lost in her own world. I don't think it was something racially motivated, but Marion, she has to like really kind of check herself, but she didn't mean no harm by it because she don't really know. And so it would have been a good time for Peggy to try to school her and be like, look, all black people ain't poor. There's a certain, we have the same thing. But again, Marion never really asked. So this goes into my other point about people having friendships with people in different cultures. Because a lot of times people have friends or people who they considered friends or friendly with. They may be coworkers, they may be neighbors, they may be ex-schoolmates or current schoolmates, or, maybe they're married to somebody within the family or something like that, and they may consider that person their friend. But I ask people, like, when you have somebody a friend of another culture, like everybody got that one black friend or one white friend or one Asian friend or something like that, like a lot of people do. I'm like, have you really had a real conversation with your friend? Because a lot of people have friends of different races, but then when it comes to things happening in the media and the news, certain issues may be brought up, and then then certain things that are very glaring on TV, and then somebody may bring something up, and then they may say something, and the other person be like, "Whoa, wait a minute, what?" That's because you're socially friends with somebody, you're surface friends with somebody, but in order to be a friend, you have to have conversations about things, not just us going out and us partying and us drinking and us shopping. That's cool. Like, that's cool. To have an acquaintance or a friend. Like, but if you want to consider somebody your friend, then to me, the friends that I have, we've had conversations about political things and about racial issues, about just them being curious. Like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? How did you grow up? How did you know? That's the forming of a real friendship, and the only way we're gonna get rid of racism is people really have real conversations with their friends. And like I said, I see a lot of people being friends with different people of different races, and then like when George Floyd hit, a lot of people stopped being friends with other people because people started posting things on Facebook that they're like, whoa, wait a minute, that's vaguely racist, or I don't really agree with that, or hey, that's totally out of left field. I never thought that person thought that way. Is because you have not had a real conversation with your quote unquote friend. So I tell people to have a friend. I mean, I can only speak as a black woman, but to have a friend that is a black person, is African American, and me having friends who are white, you have to have these conversations. Because number one, you got to know what kind of friend, what they think and what they don't think should be valuable to you. And if you don't understand something, then you'd be able to have if you've been friends for a long time, I should say, and if you really cherish this person's friendships and cherish this person, you should be able to have deep conversations without it turning into yelling matches or fighting matches or becoming disrespectful. Sometimes you have to agree to disagree. That's fine. But the point is that when you have conversations with people and you want to know where a person is coming from, it deeply enriches your relationship with that person. And I don't care if you're dating a person of another race, or friendships or acquaintance with a person of another race, because things are going to come up where either in real life where you're going to be in situations where you're going to be looking at your friend like, help me, or you're going to be looking at your friend like, what was that? Or I'm confused, what's happening? Or things you see on TV that may upset you, or like I said, things in life just happen. Things in life happen with other people in other places, and then you tell your friend like, this is happening, this bothered me, and this is why I think it happened, and somebody said something to me or somebody did something to me. You have to have a friend that's going to be like, okay, whoa, wait a minute, what happened? Let me understand. And then you would think that them person being your friend is going to understand you. But people assume that. And then when it comes to time for them to explain what happened to them or what they see or what's bothering them, then the other person's just like, okay, I don't understand the big deal, or I don't see it that way. And so you have a miscommunication, and people start feeling slighted, or feel like, I don't even know if I even know you, or push come to shove, I don't even know if this person will have my back if I was in a certain situation. So I tell people to always don't have one-sided friendships, number one. And number two, when you get to know where a person comes from, get to know, people make a lot of assumptions about people people make a lot of assumptions about me. I live in the suburbs. I have this and I'm that. I wasn't raised in the suburbs. I'm not from the suburbs. I live here. People assume that I was born and raised in Texas. I'm not born and raised in Texas, honey. I was born in the hood. If you want to know my life story, I'll be more apt to tell anybody my life story and why I see things the way I see, because I grew up in the hood. I grew up in a dangerous neighborhood. I used to run with gang members and everything when I was younger. But if somebody doesn't do a deep dive into who I am, they would never even know that. So I tell people, friendships, do a deep dive. That's why I learned from Marion and Peggy. But I you know, I think they're gonna get it together. So anyway, the Russells go to the Academy of Music, and they are going to see a John Knowles Payne, and this is John Knowles Payne. And Mr. John Knowles Payne, let's give you some little info on here. He was born in 1839. He was the first American-born composer to achieve fame for large-scale orchestra music. He was a senior member of a group of composers collectively known as the Boston Six. Payne was one of those responsible for first significant body of concert music by composers from the United States. A lot of the composers back in the day were German, Austrian, and French. So the Boston Six members had one female member, and the other members were male. He grew up in a musical family in Maine. His grandfather was an instrument maker who built the first pipe organ in the state of Maine. His father and uncles were music teachers. So yeah, he was surrounded by music, and so he was very, very popular. It was somebody, you know, you'd really want to go see. He was kind of like the, I don't know who would be really, really popular musician today, but you know, he was really, really popular. So that's a little information about John Knowles Payne, who they were going to go see. So Marion's there in Mrs. Fane's box. So is Mrs. Russell. Let me tell you, Mrs. Russell, child. Oh boy, she was wearing that red, honey. She was looking on point. Mrs. Russell looks better than everybody there put together. Hands on. Like all them other chicks, they just looking basic. Mrs. Russell showed up with that red dress on with that cape. Girl, she was swept and laid. I was like, girl, you better work, sister. Every episode, she looks gorgeous. I mean, gorgeous. The costume design is gorgeous. Everybody look good. So they all there. They sitting in the box. You know, they talking and everything. And this before it started, you know, they had a little part like where they all get together and talk before it starts. You know, they're schmoozing a little bit. So Marion looks over. She sees Mr. Rakes. He's in the box. Next to him, he's in the box. A little bit yonder, and he sees Marion. He comes over and says hi to her and talks to her and was like, have you thought about my offer? You know, he proposed to her. And again, Mr. Rakes, I don't know what to think about him. I'm really torn because I want him to be a good guy, but I don't know. But anyway, he's sitting with some people named the Schumerhorns, and apparently he got to know them through some legal matters that they had, and whatever. And so, and then, he tells Marion, nice to see her. We got to hook up. We got to do this again. And he was like, this is the Schumerhorns over there. That's them over there. And then Mrs. Schumerhorn was like, nice to meet you. And they were like, oh, well, why don't you come back over here? Mrs. blah, blah, blah. I don't know who was saying, wants to meet you. And so, he was like, okay, I got to go. I'll see you later, Marion. And she's like, okay. She was happy to see him. But then, right before the show starts, Marion looks over and see him sitting with some pretty young thing. And this pretty young thing, got the hand on the shoulder. Oh, you're so yeah. So I don't know if the Schumerhorns are trying to set Mr. Rakes up with whoever Miss blah blah blah, I forgot her name was, but I don't know if they trying to set him up or whatever. But Marion looks over and she looking like, okay. And I think she's starting to think, well, maybe he is a social climber. Maybe his interest in her isn't just he's interested in her. That maybe he is looking, to gain up in society. And so, this comes to my talk about marriage. We're gonna put the notes down because we're gonna talk about marriage. I know recently that a lot of people, if you watch the Super Bowl, I didn't watch the Super Bowl. People talk about the halftime show. And the halftime show had R&B legend Mary J. Blige in it. Now, Mary J. been around in the music industry for decades and years. And she married this dude who was her quote unquote manager. And this dude, they ended up divorcing a few years ago. And he took alimony. They didn't have no kids together. But like they got a divorce and the state awarded him like $30,000 a month. So poor Mary J was out there tap dancing and singing for her supper, in other words. So if you don't know the story, please go look it up. But poor Mary J. Blige, she had married some dude and they got a divorce and she had to pay them $30,000, I think, for like 2 years or whatever. So she was out there doing concerts, doing tours. She was saying that she barely had enough money to pay her rent because $30,000 a month is a lot, and she's worth millions. But she was saying that, having to pay her own bills and then having to pay his bills too. And then finally, I think she only had to do it for 2 years because they weren't married for very long. But I don't know if it had something to do with him being her manager too. I think that was part of it because it wasn't like he was just a regular husband. He was also her manager. So severing their marriage was also severing his business and affected his income. I'm not a divorce lawyer. Please, maybe some of y'all know better things than like me. But there are some people on the internet back then and even now, because Mary J. Blige got brought up, and she did an interview saying what was going on, and people are like, well, how could a man do that? He's a man, and I can't believe he took alimony. I mean, just like basketball players and singers who are male who marry women and they get a divorce, whether they have kids or not. These basketball players and singers and rich men, they have to pay these women alimony. It depends on what state you're in and all that other stuff and what property you own together and all of that. So some people were saying what's good for the man is good for the woman. People are like, well, why couldn't he just separate and just go about his way and not take Mary for her money? Because he married her and she shouldn't have, why would you marry somebody? And I don't think he had a lot. Correct me if I'm wrong if you know more about the story, but I don't think this dude even had a pot to piss in the window to throw at him. I think he was on the outskirts of the music industry. So what I have to say is that the idea of marrying for love and the idea of marrying and it not being a business decision is a modern notion. Even back in the day, whether it be the middle class, upper middle class, or the rich wealthy, or the moneyed people, the new money, the old money, aristocrats, no matter what country it's in or what level of social level that you're on, unless you're dirt poor and you're just doing whatever, you're doing do you. But there have always been men who've married for money. Mary J. Blige is not the only woman that have lost money to a man in the entertainment industry. There are plenty of stories of plenty of women who have lost their fortune to divorces or lost a big chunk of their coin because they divorced some dude that was their manager or agent or whatever. Maybe he was in their band or Britney Spears married Kevin Federline and he got a big old chunk of change. They had 2 kids together. He probably still getting paid from Britney. But it goes back further than that. Like when you see Ada and that other man that was trying to schmooze up to her and he was like, this is going to be my meal ticket. When you see Mr. Rakes and he trying to make his way into society. The idea that only women marry for money and only women are clout chasing for money, even back in the day, men who had a name, who were part of the aristocracy, married women who had lots of money, who came from new money. There were a whole thing of debutantes from America going over to England and marrying dukes' sons and princes. These princes and dukes had no money, but they had titles. And they had a way for these women their whole families to break into business and into society by just marrying a duke or a baron's son or a count or something. They wanted the name, they wanted the clout, they wanted it all. So the women were getting the clout and everything. But these men they married, some of these men, these princes and counts and these well-known men, they spent all their money. The only thing new about it now is that divorce is you can easily get a divorce. And divorce wasn't so frowned upon. But these men were if you look it up, were taking women for their money. They were marrying women They were 30 years old, 40 years old, just like Oscar and Gladys. And they were marrying 15, 16, 17-year-old because they had money. Oscar is not interested in women. He don't want to be with Gladys. He want to be Gladys because he wants to be stable. But at least Oscar has a job. Apparently he's in banking or something. But some of these men who married these women, they didn't even have that. They didn't have no career. They gambled away all their money, these women. They had children with these women. They left their children with nothing. Look at in the case of Marion. She was left with nothing. Her father had all the family money and left her with nothing. And then apparently, I don't know what her mom's situation was, but maybe she had a little bit of coin. Maybe he squandered it all. But the idea that a man is just going to leave a marriage without nothing, I mean, leaving a marriage and divorce and alimony is a very modern thing. But marrying for money, laying up with a woman and marrying some chick that you're not even in love with, or you may not even be attracted to, or you gay and you just, people were marrying for security. And like I said, it's just the stereotype is young women who have money, who are trying to marry a man with money, or they don't have a lot of money and they're marrying a man, they're trying to marry up. Men married up too. Women weren't the only ones marrying up. Men weren't the only people out there spending their money. But like I said, back in the day, you couldn't get a divorce. A woman just had to sit there and do nothing. She had no legal recourse in a lot of these countries, depending on the time period, to even do anything about it. She just sit back and watch her husband piss away all her money, gamble it away, wasting on women, business ventures that didn't go through. And legally speaking, she just had to sit there and just be like, and fight with him and argue with this fool and be like, you know, and try to get her brothers or father or somebody to vouch for her to do something. I mean, it was a lot of these women were trapped in the type of society it was. And like I said, this wasn't just moneyed and rich people. Even middle class black people, you were expected to marry within your class strata. You were expected, or even above. Or well, but there were men out there who came from doctors and lawyers and good black families who married women who came from good families as well, but maybe they had a little bit more money. And the reason why they were marrying, it wasn't about love. It was about, okay, I want to break into business. I'm trying to, this person's going to be my meal ticket. And it still goes on today. So the idea that Mary J. Blige, you know, what her husband did to her was so shocking. I'm like, this happens to average people all over the world. There are plenty of women out there who got master degrees and doctors and nurses and lawyers and then they marry these dudes that's like a mechanic or something. And I'm not saying it's not love. I'm just saying that a lot of times these men, they know what they doing. They like, I got a woman. She got a nice house. She got a nice car. She seems pretty stable. I'm not saying he not working. You know, I'm not saying he a gold digger, but he ain't messing with no broke chick. But what is that? Is that a song by Kanye Cole? So again, I thought that was comical that people are like, well, you should be a man, bruh, and you should man up, and you shouldn't have took their alimony. What? Like, I'm not mad at anybody taking some alimony from a divorce. I'm not mad at nobody taking no alimony, because I feel like a person should have she should have had a prenup. She did not. And I feel like in these day and age, the pie in the sky, I'm just marrying for romance. And I tell people that's a modern thing. People back then did not marry for love and romance and, you know, nothing like that. Maybe the poor people did, but I don't care if you're black. I don't care if you're white, if you're Asian. The more money you had and the more social status you had, the less likely you were going to just marry somebody willy-nilly. Most of the time your parents are setting you up with somebody. The church is setting you up with somebody. It wasn't like today where you're just going out and meeting somebody at a bar or a club and you start dating. No, marriage was definitely a business arrangement. Whether you agree with that or not, I don't know. But the idea that like these notions and things that we have of marriage, like it's before God and it's romantic. I tell people those are modern notions. Marriage did not start out like that. Marriage did not start just because of God in the Bible. And marriage didn't start out as some sort of loving arrangement. Marriage started out as a way to be settled, as a contract, as a way to get ahead in life, as a way of finding financial security for your offspring, for you and your offspring. That's all marriage was. So, you know, all these things that you hear and these people watch these Disney movies and stuff, that's not real. That marriage was definitely, you know, who look good on paper. You don't have to be attracted to them or like them, or even think they're cute, but or like their personalities. People stuck in marriages, people they hate it. So I just hate when people start putting modern notions on marriage. So that was my little spiel about that. So again, like, share, subscribe, comment, and definitely subscribe. We'll see you for episode 5. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks.